I wanted to start out by saying that the idea for this book, which changed a lot from the initial idea to where it wound up, actually came from a student who was really nervous about getting up on the BIMA in front of other people. And while he did not use the exact words that I put in the student's mouth in the book, um, it did get me thinking about what if there were a body on the BIMA? How would that, what would actually happen with that? So I thought I would share with you some excerpts from the first and second chapters because I think that that sets up the tone of this and hopefully makes those of you who haven't read it yet want to read it. Chapter 1, Sam's Worst Fear. Maybe if I had known what was about to happen and what we were about to find, I would have chosen my words more carefully when I was working with Sam and the rest of Kita Kochavim this past fall. But never in my worst nightmares had I expected anything like this to happen. Classes for Kita Kochavim, the 6th and 7th grade students, were held on Tuesday nights in the chapel. All of the kids and teens in the congregation at Synagogue B'Kol Makom attend public schools with their peers, then come here to the synagogue a few hours a week to learn about Jewish practices and beliefs. We have a wing of the synagogue building with classrooms that are used for the younger grades. But as a recognition that the 6th and 7th graders were on the cusp of being considered adults for Jewish ritual purposes, their class was held in the chapel. That particular Tuesday evening was much like many other sessions I enjoyed with Kita Kochavim. I chatted with the tweens as they slowly came into class and settled into the seats I had arranged in a circle. I let them have a few minutes to talk about whatever was foremost on their minds. Usually this involved tests, teachers, or other kids in their classes. I knew as soon as I told them what was coming, there would be a lot of moans and excuses. So I wanted them to be as calm and present as possible before I began. And I had found this bit of chaotic conversation for the first few minutes had precisely that effect most days. Once it looked like everyone had arrived, I quickly got their attention and jumped right into my big announcement. Kita Kochavim, your class service will be in 3 weeks. That means in 3 weeks, at the end of October, you will be the one leading prayers on Friday night. As expected, this announcement was met with a chorus of moans, grumbles, complaints, and excuses. "Do we have to?" asked Emma Silverman in her typical whiny voice. She often acted as if being asked to do anything at all was beneath her. Her blonde hair was always styled in perfect ringlets and pulled out of her face with a cute hair accessory to match her outfit. I couldn't believe the way she came to class each week wearing clothes that looked like they cost more than I made in a year. And she was still growing. I tend to favor comfortable clothes that have decent-sized pockets and are versatile enough for the many different tasks I perform in a given day. But sometimes, I'll admit, I was a bit jealous of Emma's outfits and how put together and self-assured she looked. Before the wine stopped, Isaac Weiss groaned dramatically and declared in a bored-sounding tone, "We did that last year." Isaac's brown hair was long in the front and often obscured at least part of his face. He also tended to wear baggy hoodies and sit in a bit of a slouch with his feet stretched in front of him. He always acted as if he were here under duress, but I sensed that was just an act he was putting on in front of his peers, since he often had insightful comments to add to class discussions. "I have something else I need to do that day," added Ethan Kleinman quickly. I think there's a soccer tournament. That's it, a soccer tournament. Sorry, Rabbi. Got to be there for my team. They need me. The grass stains, shin guards, and odor surrounding him made it clear Ethan had come to class that evening straight from soccer practice. But from the way his words tumbled out, I knew he was just giving me an excuse. I also knew in the end, Ethan's parents would prioritize this class service over a soccer game. "I think I'm going to be sick," Sam Rosenberg muttered under his breath as his face took on a pale greenish tinge. Sam, are you okay? Asked Hannah Berman. She was often overlooked because she could be rather quiet in a group setting, but she really was a sweet, caring girl. Sam shook his head somewhat violently, so Hannah nudged the trash can closer to him, just in case. To move attention away from Sam and to address the complaints and worries before they could start to pile on top of each other, I spoke up. Yes, Emma, you all have to do it. Ethan, you're part of the team here too. You did lead a service last year, Isaac, but this one's going to be different. Just because we have services every week doesn't mean we can't make this one different from any other Shabbat service you've ever been to. There were still some grumbles, but I could see there was a glimmer of curiosity in some of their eyes. Of course, they immediately demanded to know how it would be different. Fortunately, I had anticipated this and was ready with an answer. We're going to be adding special creative elements. I know you have a lot of questions about what that means, and I can see not all of you are ready to trust me yet, but believe me, this will be a good thing. I'm going to ask you to hold off judgment until the end of class today. You think you can do that? They somewhat grudgingly said yes, which I knew to take as more of a reluctant maybe, so I quickly introduced the first task of the evening. Sam, you don't look so good just now. Are you okay? No, he said in a small voice. What's wrong, Sam? Does this have something to do with the class service? I can't do it, he wailed. Why not? I asked, both puzzled and concerned. I just can't, he shouted, then mumbled into his lap. Okay? Sam, I coaxed in the same tone I might use on a skittish cat. This isn't the first time you've helped lead a service with your classmates. I just can't. What are you trying to avoid, Sam? I asked gently. Last time I ran off and barfed, he mumbled. I remember you left early before dinner, but I thought you were sick with a stomach bug. That's what everyone said. That's what my mom told everyone, but it wasn't a stomach bug. I'm sorry to hear that, Sam. It's okay to be nervous. A lot of people, both kids and grown-ups, get nervous when they're standing up in front of other people. Even as I said it, I recognized Sam's reaction was more extreme than just being a bit nervous. Forget it, he mumbled so softly I barely caught the next couple of words. I knew no one would understand. I just know this service is going to be even worse than the last one I led. I really wanted to give the poor kid a hug, but instead I simply said, So last year's class service didn't go so well for you. That doesn't mean the same thing will happen this year. It's the same service, and you know it even better now than you did last time. Sam just shook his head no and looked like he might faint. He mumbled something under his breath that I strained to catch. I think he said, I knew no one would get it. The other kids will make fun of me, and my dad will get mad. He'll kill me. I'm clearly doomed. I'm going to die right there in the middle of the service, and everyone will laugh, he exclaimed with such despair and defeat in his voice. Hey, Sam, it's going to be okay, I said, seeing how miserable he looked. Yeah, maybe for you and some of the other kids. Not for me, he said glumly. I know you're trying to make it all seem like fun and all, but if I have to be a part of this class service, I just know I'll die on the BIMA. And obviously my parents will kill me if I refuse to go. Look, you're right. You could get sick again. You could faint or barf or forget the words. I don't think you'll do any of those things, but I'll admit there's a possibility. And you probably won't believe me if I tell you none of that is the end of the world. I know you're worried about your dad's reaction, but we both know he won't actually kill you. All of the adults in your life will still love you and be proud of you for the effort you're putting in. And the kids who are your friends won't laugh or tease you. They'll be worried about whether you're okay or not. As for the rest, what they think or say doesn't really matter. Couldn't tell from Sam's sigh whether any of what I was saying was helping or getting through to him, but I sure hoped it was. I had spied the clock out of the corner of my eye and knew I should try to move Sam on to doing at least some of what was planned for today's lesson. So with a faint smile, I assured Sam that in all my years of doing this, I could confidently say, no one has ever died on the BIMA in the middle of their class service, either here or at any of the congregations where my friends work. I told him the more you practice, the more words will just pour out of you without you even having to think. So let's rejoin your classmates. If only I had known how those words would come back to haunt me. Chapter 2, A Deadly Discovery. Those 3 weeks flew by, and before I knew it, it was the day for Kita Kochavim to stand up on the bima and lead us all into Shabbat. As the start time for the service grew closer, activity in the building increased. The caterers were busy in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on dinner, and the custodian was double-checking the bathrooms and doing his best to get the temperature right. I could hear someone in the sanctuary setting up some flowers, and volunteers were setting the tables. Mina Mushkin, Synagogue B'Kol Makom's administrative assistant, had let in the evening's greeters and ushers. It wasn't long before I closed the door to my office and went to greet the 6th and 7th graders and their families, as well as the regular Friday night service attendees. The first thing I heard as some of the kids walked in was someone saying, "Heart attacks killed more people last year than cancer did." "Wrong! It's heart disease and stroke that claims more lives than cancer and respiratory diseases," corrected a somewhat prissy-sounding female voice that must have belonged to Emma. "Whatever," sneered the first voice, who I now saw was Ethan. "Still means a lot of people die of heart attacks every day." Sam's green face came into view, surrounded by a couple of his animated classmates. "I think I'll die of fright," he mumbled. "You really can die of fright, you know," piped up another helpful student. "My mom's a doctor. She said when you get really frightened, you get this rush of adrenaline, and your heart rate goes up, and your pupils get dilated. Then your heart muscles can't relax, and you lose consciousness." Yikes! This was a rather disturbing conversation for them to have right before their class service. If we were sitting around a campfire roasting marshmallows, that would be a different story. Before the conversation could go any further and the kids could wind each other up and get more panicked, I pulled them all aside and reassured them all they were correct. These awful things could potentially happen. The likelihood was very low. Instead of scaring one another, I asked them what techniques they all knew for calming down. I managed to phrase the question in such a way it was immediately pounced upon as a challenge. Various breathing techniques, counting, paying attention to your senses, and other helpful techniques were all suggested. Once anxiety levels were all back down in a more manageable range, at least for everyone who wasn't Sam, I checked to make sure all the students were present and accounted for, and that everyone was wearing appropriate clothing. Sometimes when kids or teens get up to lead services, skirts are too short, pants are falling down, or someone has on a potentially offensive t-shirt, or someone is unsteady on high heels. Fortunately, everyone looked fine tonight. I made sure each student had a copy of the program, a siddur, prayer book, and any supplemental readings or other pieces that they had prepared. I then showed them the bags and boxes of candy I had bought as promised. I told the class they could use them as props during the service, and they would all get a chance to eat the candy after the service was over. Once they had the treats in hand, I urged them to take their places on the bima so the service could begin. As they got up there, I heard Hannah ask, "Why did someone leave their shoes on the bima? And with the toast pointing to the ceiling, too?" "Someone left their shoes on the bima? That's weird," echoed Emma. Guys, I don't think those shoes are empty," said Ethan. "What do you mean not empty?" asked Hannah. "You mean someone's sleeping on the bima? There are much better places in this building to take a nap." Sam didn't say anything, but his face took on a sicklier tone than just moments before. This did not look like his usual nerves. "Okay, everyone," I said calmly as I faced the class, "please take a breath, and can someone tell me what has you all huddled together like this? And why are you talking about shoes and places to nap?" Without speaking, Sam pointed to the floor in front of him. I couldn't see what he was pointing at because there was a large reader's table, like a triple-wide lectern, separating me from the students. I could hear his teeth start to chatter like he was trying to talk but couldn't get any sounds out. "Those shoes are definitely not empty," said Ethan with more certainty than before. "There's someone lying on the floor," Emma managed to say, and I think it might be blood, she said with her voice rising higher and shakier with each word. Somehow he seems to have fallen under the reading table, commented Isaac in a voice that sounded unnaturally calm. Good point, said Ethan. Otherwise it might be his head sticking out and his legs hidden behind that cloth thingy. Hannah pulled Emma into a hug and turned to look at me with wide eyes. I think he's hurt, she said, adding, no one just takes a nap under the reading table, do they? But if he's hurt, what do we do? Asked Sam. Let me take a look, I said calmly as I walked around to where they were all standing. Even though my heart was beating faster and faster as the shoes in question came into view, I knew I needed to stay calm and in charge for the sake of the students and everyone else who had come to the service. If I didn't handle this carefully, I could see how something unexpected like this could quickly devolve into one of pure panic, with rippling ramifications for student enrollment, synagogue membership, even my own career future here could be compromised and could affect my chances to anywhere else I might want to go later. I lifted the edge of the cloth that covered the reader's table from which the shoes protruded. Not that I had doubted them, but the students were right. Those brown dress shoes were not empty. My eyes traveled up the legs that were covered in creased gray slacks, and I took in the sight of someone lying down on the carpet. The light was dim, and I didn't want to raise the cloth any higher, but it looked like the carpet around the person was really dirty. I really hoped I was just imagining I saw parts of this person's brain. I refused to scream. I needed to keep calm for the sake of the kids. I repeated that last thought over and over to myself, as if it were a mantra that would magically make this go back to a normal service led by students. The class was the quietest and stillest I had ever seen them as they waited for me to do something. They stared at me expectantly. I may have sounded a little bit unhinged, but I made sure to stay out of range of the microphones as I cleared my throat and asked the class, do any of you read mysteries or watch crime shows or hospital dramas? My question was just odd enough their faces slowly took on a look of puzzlement rather than panic or horror. It took only a minute, but felt like an hour before a couple hands started to inch up. Excellent, my heartbeat began to gradually slow back down as I watched the change in their expressions and gathered my courage to take charge of the situation. So in those books, or on those shows, what's the first thing someone's supposed to do if they find a person who seems to be really hurt? Call 911, said Ethan. And if they think something about the situation seems suspicious, I asked. Don't touch anything. Call the police, a tentative voice said. But usually they do end up touching something they shouldn't have before they finally get around to calling the police. They might not call the police right away, but we will, I said calmly. We'll all step away and not touch anything. I selected one of the students who looked the most collected and asked her to please bring Mina over. Not onto the BIMA, I clarified, but close enough that I could speak with her without leaving the class or using the microphone. I didn't need her to see what I strongly suspected was not just an injured person, but a dead body, possibly a murder victim. The students complied quickly, and I filled Mina in on the basics of the situation. Don't panic, I said to Mina, realizing as I said it, that was an awful way to start. But we have a situation here. Mina's eyes went wide. A situation? What do you need me to do? Call the police, please. Let them know we found a body.